Hi guys. So I got an interesting question from one of my friends this week. He essentially asked me how to find, or what's the most effective way to find gaps in a number sequence in Excel. I gave him a couple of ideas, but then I thought, well, maybe I should explore the new Excel, well, some of the new Excel functions and formulas that are out there, especially array formulas and array functions. And I've found an interesting way of doing this. There's multiple ways of finding this answer, and there are older solutions online, but I haven't found this specific solution online. And then I thought, well, I might as well share it. So please feel free to work with me. You'll find a link to this workbook in the comments or in the video description below. Please feel free and download it and work with me. And I hope you learn something from this. And if you find a better solution or if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave that in the comments. Um, what I've realized with Excel is you always have something to learn from someone, and yeah, I hope you enjoy and I hope you learn. And if you do, then give me a like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and I'll appreciate that if you feel like I've earned it. So let's get into this. I've created an invoice listing, just to give an example, because you don't always just have numbers and they're not always in order. And as you can see, these are randomized. So first things first, I want to break them up. I want to break the numbers away from the text. And again, there's multiple ways of doing this. A quick and nice way to do this is to use the right formula. The right formula gives you the ability to return the right of a string, or a string of characters. And in this case, I can actually say, well, give me the right of the six characters, or the right six characters in the string, and that will return this number. And if I then go and say, well, give me the value of that, the value function actually converts that into a number or an integer. It extracts the value from that. Um, to make it even more advanced in a sense, we can also add the length function to this, and the len will actually give us the ability to the len function will actually give us the ability to take the length of the actual string. So in this case, it's 9 characters, but we want to say, well, the length less 3, so we want to get to the 6. And in that way, if it's not always 6 characters after the INV, but I know that the INV will always be there, I extract the first, or I remove the first 3 characters in that way. And then if we look at how I would have done this previously, is I would have double clicked on this little corner and it'll copy my formula down, or I would just click and drag it. But because we are working with Office or Microsoft 365, and I'm on the Insiders program, but even the normal Office 365 versions actually have the ability to now use array formulas. So instead of just referencing the B6, I can reference the full range now. I go and select the full range, and I would want to copy this range across into my length function as well, and that actually spills a range. And how I can see it spilled is I could just type something there and you'll see I get a spill error, but it spills the full answer for me. And what's nice about this is now this becomes an array, and that array becomes an array reference. And what do I mean by that? If I want to determine what the first value is in the list of numbers, I can use the min function, which would return the smallest number in the set of values. And now I can just go and select that full range, and you'll see that it refers to C6 hash and not C6 to C whatever 506 or something. Um, so in essence, this little hash means the array or the spilled range, and I can also refer to it by typing the hash. So I can now go, if I'm looking for the highest value in the list or in the range, then I can just type the hash, and I don't have to go and select the full range. So now I know that my first value is 745, my last value is 1244. In order to determine which numbers are missing, I need to compare it to a list of numbers that are basically in sequence, right? And that contains, or that's contained within the full sequence. And to do that, I can use the sequence function. The sequence function actually builds a sequence of numbers. So it builds an array of numbers, and essentially what I can do is I can say, well, I want a number of rows. I can even build out columns, etc. But I want rows, and how do I determine the number of rows? I'm going to say the max value less the min value, so the last less the first plus 1. And then I don't want any columns, so I'm going to skip columns, and I want you to start at the first value. And that essentially spills the full range of numbers in order. And already here I can see that I'm missing 10 numbers. So that's that. And then usually one would go and maybe VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP, or if index match, or use a lookup formula to say, well, now I can go and say, well, look up for me all these values. And again, because I'm using sequence and it's spilling an array, I can refer to a range with a hash. My lookup array is this range with a hash, and return for me this range with a hash. If it's not found, tell me not found. And that's why I like using XLOOKUP, because I actually have error handling built in. If I use the VLOOKUP, it would have just returned a hash not applicable, or hash NA value. If not found is not a necessity. The match mode is not a necessity. It will return an exact match by default. And then I also have the search mode, which enables me to search bottom to top. And those are some of the functionalities that I don't have with VLOOKUP, but that spills for me, and I can see that 759 wasn't found, 838 wasn't found, etc. So I don't need to use an XLOOKUP, because essentially this parameter is not necessary, because I'm looking up a number, I'm not looking up a different value. So, and that's why I can actually just use a match. And I like using XMATCH, because XMATCH essentially is the new version of match, and it returns an exact match by default. So you'll see that an exact match is required. So that means I just need to give it 2 parameters, and that's much less than I need to give it an XLOOKUP. And what an XMATCH would return is the relative position of where the match was found. So I'll show you what that means. But essentially, I'm going to look up my sequence, and I'm going to look that up in the range of values that we have in the invoice listing, and that's all I need to give. And I can see that 745, which is the first value, is first, and therefore it is the first. It returns a 1 on the match. So the 769 was actually found in the 320th position, and if I scroll down, I will see that that is that is number 746. And again, I have a not applicable here where I don't have a not found. So what I could do is I could wrap the XMatch in an if error, for instance, and basically say, when that's not found, or when there's an error, tell me it's not found. But in my example, I don't want to do that, and I'll show you why now. Now I just want a list of the numbers that are not that wasn't found, and to do that I can use the filter. And again, I want to filter the full list, and I only want Excel to include where my match was an error, right? Because wherever an error was found, it's supposed to be a number that it's missing. So I can use the isError function, and the isError function gives me the ability to take that match value, and wherever that is an error, it will basically filter for me the numbers that I'm missing, and I've got my 10 values there. So how do I now combine all of that into one formula that I can use? And I'm going to use a let function here. And the reason for using a let, just to explain what let does, let assigns calculation results to names. So I can store names, multiple names, using the let function and use those names later in the function to refer to parts uh, parts earlier in the function, and I'll show you what that means. It's not as complex as it sounds, but essentially what I've done here is I've referred to the same parameter or the same range or the same value or the same reference twice. And that's a perfect time for me to use a let, because if I need to update this range, I just need to update it once using the let, and it makes my function more readable because I can assign a proper name to it, and it makes it easier to understand. So I'm a big fan of the let function, and you'll see why in a second. So essentially, what I like doing with the let is I like also breaking it up across lines and expanding my formula bar. And what I can now do is I can say, well, give me my range, right? So I want to tell you that my range is essentially this range of numbers. And then I also want to now define my first value, and my first value is essentially that one, and my last number is this one. And then I want to go and build my sequence. So now I can say full range is the sequence, sorry, search the sequence of, now I can use last less first plus 1, and I skip columns. I want to start at the first. You see, this is where the let is powerful, because now I don't need to refer to the range C2, C3 multiple times. I can use the names, and that becomes very valuable when I start building a lambda. And I'll show you the lambda right now. And then next up, once I've built my full range, I can start building my filter. And just to get back to let, you'll see that let actually gives me, so the first two parameters would be a name, so at least one name needs to be given. So like my range is a name, first is a name, last is a name. Give one name, give that name a value. It can be a value, it can be a reference, it can be a calculation. Then next up, after that, it can become a calculation or another name. So I can create multiple names, but once I start with a calculation, I'm done with my naming conventions, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go and say, well, filter for me, full range. Okay, so we want to filter the full range of numbers, and we only want to include where we have an error on my XMATCH of matching my full range to my range. And if I've done that correctly, I would get to the same answer. And I mean, that's super powerful. I can easily build that out quickly, but it is quite complex. And if I want to do this quite regularly, let's say I want to do this, or I do this on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, or every time I find a new invoice listing, I want to be able to use this formula or function again, but I don't want to remember all of this, and I don't want to type it out, and I don't want to struggle. That is the perfect use case for a lambda. And in order to build a lambda, well, the newer way of building lambdas, you can actually build a lambda in cell, but what the Excel team has built recently is a little add-in called the advanced formula environment. And if you want to add the advanced formula environment quickly, you can go into insert get add-ins and go and search for advanced formula environment. And once you install that, or once you've added it, it will appear in your home tab and you can click on that. And the advanced formula environment gives you a nice little pane on the right hand side of Excel that gives you the ability to build Lambda functions, or essentially anything that becomes a named range, right? Because this function will actually become a named range at a later stage. So how does it work? I can create a new one, and I can click on the full screen so that it gives me a more readable area, and I can now give my formula a name. So I'm going to call my formula sequence gaps, because I want to find gaps in the sequence. And essentially I want to say this is a lambda. And what's nice about the advanced formula environment is I can go down, I can add more lines, I can paste, and it actually gives me a bit of error handling as well. So with a lambda is similar to a let in that a lambda gives me the ability to add parameters. And what I can do now is I can actually go and move these parameters out, because they will become parameters. I'm not going to give the lambda function my references or my cells, because I want to actually provide those when I use the function or the formula, right? So my let is going to remain pretty much the same or very similar, but I want to actually have my range as a first parameter, then first as a second parameter. But I also now have the ability since September last year to make this an optional value, because like I've shown with the min and the max, we can actually derive the first and the last values automatically. So I'm going to make those optional, and then I'm also able to, well, I'm going to call this one start over here, and I'm going to call this one end, and you'll see why now. But within my let, I'm going to define more names. I'm going to now say, well, this is, so first, the first value is now going to be if I've omitted my start. So I can actually use the isOmitted function and say, well, if the user has omitted start, then use the min of my range. Okay, so then derive the first number yourself. Otherwise, use the start value. Okay, and do exactly the same for the end value. So I'm just going to copy this one down, and I'm going to say, well, my last value is if the user has omitted the last value. So because, oh sorry, not the end value. So if end is omitted from the actual use of the formula, then use the max of my range. Otherwise, use end. Okay, and the rest of it stays the same. So I hope that makes sense. But essentially, again, the let function gives me the ability to create new names, and I want to use the first and last like I've used it in the previous formula, but I want to give the user the ability, or myself, the ability to provide a start or end value. But if I don't want to provide that value, I don't. And I don't have to, and the number will be automatically determined or derived from the min and the max of the range of numbers that's provided. Hope that makes sense. When I'm done, I can save it, and Excel goes and edits it, or goes in and lays it out quite nicely for me, so that I can see what my parameters are in my lambda, and I can see what each name is that I've created, as well as my formula. And it's not that complex if I look at it like this. And if I break it up like this, it's not that complex. So what's nice is now when I'm done, I can click on the synchronize button, and that goes and synchronizes the name into the Excel name. So if I go into formulas and I go into name manager, sequence gaps is now there, and it refers to my Lambda function. And I can close this advanced formula environment. Now, if all goes well and I've done it correctly, I can use sequence gaps. And what's nice about it is the names that I've provided are now provided over here as well. So there's a bit of a black box element where the user hopefully knows now how to use my function, but I can now go and just refer to my sequence or my numbers, and if I've done it correctly, then I've got my answer. And this is awesome. I can also now use this in other formulas. So if I wanted a count of the numbers, I could go count A of all of this, and I've got my 10. Because it's numbers, I could probably use count as well. But now I can actually use my formula as any other Excel formula out there. So I can even say, well, I want the min of sequence gaps, and the first number essentially is 759 that's missing. I think I've made my point, but I can use the max as well, and this little formula can now be synchronized across my workbooks, and within this workbook can always be used again. So if I change these numbers, for instance, if I make this 744, for instance, then 744 is added. I can even make it 740, and I can make this 1254, for instance, and the numbers actually expand automatically. My lambda now gives me the ability to provide more values, and I can actually because it's optional, I can add those into my formula, and my formula expands on its own and builds out a dynamic array formula in no time. Well, I think this is valuable, and if it's something that you use quite often, it's something that could add a lot of value to your life. And what's also evident from this is, I mean, the numbers are also dynamic. Sorry, the numbers are also in order. So in number order, and I didn't even have to use a sort in order to do this. So I can now apply a sort into this, but because the sequence is already filled or is already in order, my answer will always be in number order, regardless of whether my invoice numbers are in value are in order. So in the end, very powerful little formula that uses quite a couple of new functions and functionality in Excel. So I hope you enjoy. If you enjoyed this video, please tell me that you enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, thanks for watching.